Most P&C agency owners are trying to get their team to sell more life insurance by giving them more life insurance training. And I actually think that that's part of the problem. Because in most agencies, the life sale does not die because the producer forgot what term insurance is. It dies way before that. It dies in the awkward jump from auto and home to life. And if that transition feels random, the producer feels salesy. The customer gets defensive, and the whole conversation gets shut down before the quote is ever built. So in this video, I want to show you why generic life insurance training usually falls flat inside P&C agencies, and what your team actually needs if you want them opening more life insurance conversations during the calls they're already having. Because there's a big difference between teaching someone about life insurance and teaching a P&C team how to naturally bring up life insurance when a customer called in about auto, home, billing, service, renewals, adding a vehicle. Those are not the same thing. And that difference is where most agencies are losing the sell. Here's the first thing to understand. You cannot copy what life-only agents do and expect it to work in the same way inside a P&C agency. That's like watching a guy bench press 300 pounds and saying, okay, I'll just put 300 pounds on the bar. That's not how it works. A life-only agent is usually talking to someone who raised their hand. They filled out a form. They requested more information about life insurance. They essentially said, I'm interested in life insurance. That means the conversation starts with buying intent. But your team is usually not starting there. Your team is usually talking to someone who says, hey Coulter, I need to add a car to my policy. Or my home policy is renewing and I've got some questions. I've got a question about my bill. I just refinanced my house and need to update my policy. My son just got a license and I need to add him to as a driver. I need to remove a vehicle. I need to update my mortgagee. That is a completely different starting point. So if your producer takes that conversation and randomly says, something like, hey, we do a good job at taking care of your home and auto, but where do you have your life insurance? It feels disconnected. The customer feels it, the producer feels it, and that's why the producer just stops asking. And it's not because they're lazy. It's not because they don't care. It's not because they don't believe that life insurance matters and is important. A lot of the time, they just don't know how to make the conversation feel natural. And this is why I think most agency owners misdiagnose the problem. They think that the problem is motivation. And they say things like, Coulter, my team just won't ask. They know that they're supposed to ask, but they're not doing it. I've told them 100 times. We talk about life insurance every single week in our team meetings. We have our goals. We've got these contests. We've got these incentives. And listen, those things can absolutely help. But the question is, what exactly are they supposed to say? Because telling your team to ask more is not a sales process. Telling your team to bring up life more often is not a conversation structure. Telling your team everybody needs a life quote does not solve the moment where they have to actually open their mouth and transition from P&C to life. That moment is the gap. That moment is usually where the conversation falls flat. Your team does not need to ask harder. They need a better transition. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say a customer calls into your agency to add a vehicle, and that vehicle has a loan on it. The bad version is, hey, we're taking care of your auto insurance. Where do you have your life insurance? That feels random. It feels like the producer just decided to change the subject. It feels like the customer came in for one thing and now we're trying to sell them something else. A better version would sound more like this. Since we're adding a vehicle that's got a loan on it, we should also make sure we've looked at what protects that loan and your family if something happened to you. Now, life insurance is not random. It's connected to the reason for the phone call. The customer is already thinking about this new vehicle. They're already thinking about this new monthly payment that they have. They're already thinking about this loan and debt they just took out. So now the life conversation has a reason. That's the difference. Same thing with the homeowner's renewal. A bad version is, hey, do you have any life insurance? Or would you like me to send you a quote for life insurance as well? That may work sometimes, but most of the time it feels like a cold pivot. A better transition would be, hey, since your home is coming up on its renewal, I also want to make sure that we've reviewed what protects the mortgage if something happens to you. That connects the life insurance conversation to the home policy. Now you're not randomly pitching life insurance. You're bringing awareness to an exposure that already exists. Same thing with a mortgagee change. The customer refinanced their house. Maybe they call in, you get an email from the bank, and because they need to update their mortgagee on their policy, most agencies will just handle this task and just move on. But there is a life insurance opportunity sitting right there. A better transition would be, hey, since we're updating the mortgage information on your policy, it's also a good time to make sure that we've reviewed what protects the mortgage if something happened to you or your spouse. Again, it's connected. It fits the moment. It does not feel like you forced a life insurance, product into a conversation. Same thing with a new driver. Maybe a teenage driver gets added to some policies. A spouse gets added. A household changes. The bad version is, hey, do you want a life insurance quote? Or, hey, what are you doing about your life insurance? The better version is, since we're updating the household with another driver, it's also a good time to make sure that the people depending on the household are protected if something unexpected were to happen. The difference is not magic. The difference is the transition. And this is why life insurance opportunities are already built into normal P&C activity. Added autos, home renewals, mortgage changes, new drivers, renters policies, billing calls, auto and home quotes for new business, policy reviews, maybe renters becoming homeowners, removed vehicles, auto claims follow-ups. These are all moments where a customer's life, their household, their family, debt, financial responsibility is already on the table. The opportunity is not missing. The transition is missing. And that is why generic life insurance training falls flat. Most life insurance training teaches your team how to sell life insurance, but your team freezes before the product ever comes up. They freeze because they don't know how to bring it up without sounding salesy. And that is a very different problem. If a producer feels like they're forcing a product into a service call, they're going to just avoid it. If a CSR feels like they're interrupting the customer's reason for calling, they're going to avoid it. If the transition feels awkward, they're going to avoid it. And then the owner looks at the activity and says, why in the hell is nobody asking? But the team is thinking, I don't know how to say it without sounding pushy. That's the real issue. And this matters because P&C customers did not raise their hand for life insurance. They called about their auto policy. They called about home. They called about a question on their bill. They called about a renewal that they just got. They called about a change they need to make. So the conversation just has to start differently. You cannot treat a P&C customer like a life insurance lead. A life insurance lead came in with buying intent. A P&C customer came in with a P&C task. So if you want life insurance to fit that conversation, you need to connect it to the task that they already called and care about. That is where the transition comes in. The transition should do three things. Number one, it should start with the reason for the phone call. Number two, it should identify the exposure that's connected to that reason. And number three, it should open a life insurance conversation in a way that feels helpful, not pushy. So the structure is simple. Reason for the call, exposure, and protection conversation. Let's go back to the added auto example. The reason for the call. We're adding this new vehicle that we just purchased. The exposure. It's got a loan on it. It's a $50,000 loan financed with ABC Bank. The protection conversation. We should make sure that we've looked at what protects this loan and your family if God forbid something happened to you. That's it. That's simple. It's connected, and that is something a normal producer can actually say. And that's important because your team does not need this big old long complicated script. They just need the words that they can use on their next phone call. They need the word tracks for the situations they're already handling every day. They need to know what to say with people adding vehicles. They need to know what to say with people on homeowners renewals. They need to know what to say on mortgagee changes. They need to know what to say on billing calls. They need to know what to say when a customer says, "Oh, Coulter, I've already got that coverage through work." They need to know what to say when the customer says, "You know what, Coulter, I'm good. Thanks for the information." Because as soon as your team gets one of those early objections and they don't know what to do next, the conversation is over. The customer says, "I already have it." And the producer says, "Oh, okay, no problem. Check," and the opportunity's gone. But that objection does not have to end the conversation. For example, if a customer says, "I have life insurance through work," your team does not need to argue. They don't need to pressure. They can just simply say, "That's great. A lot of people have some coverage through work. Do you know if that's enough to cover the mortgage and replace your income? Or is it more of like a smaller employer benefit?" That keeps the conversation going. Or they can say, "You know, that's great. The only reason I ask is because most work coverage is tied to the job. So if you change jobs, retired, or got sick and you couldn't work, do you know if that coverage will follow you or will it stay with the company?" Again, that's not pushy. That's helpful. That's bringing awareness to the gap. And that's the difference between pushing a product and helping the customer see the exposure. That's what your team needs to learn. Now, if I owned a P&C agency and I wanted my team to write more life insurance, here's what I would not do. I would not start by dumping 30 scripts on them. I would not start by telling everyone to ask every single customer. I would not start by yelling about the life insurance goals. I would not start by saying, "We need more life insurance policies this month," and then just hoping that they figure it out. Instead, I would pick one transaction for the week, just one, and let's say that that's added autos, and then I would give the team one opener. I would explain why that opener works, and then I would have them practice it for 10 minutes. Then I would have them use it on every added auto that week. That's it. One situation, one transition for 1 week. Then the next week, I might move to homeowners renewals. And then same thing. One opener, one transition, practice it, use it. Then the next week, mortgage changes. Then new drivers. Then billing calls. Then new auto and home quotes that we're doing. That's how your team will build confidence. Not by memorizing a giant life insurance presentation, not by becoming life insurance only agents, not by trying to do a full needs analysis on every single service call that we're taking. They build confidence by learning how to open simple, connected conversations in the moments that are already happening inside the agency. Because look, your service people can sell, but they need it to feel helpful. They need it to feel connected. They need it to feel like they're protecting the customer, not just forcing a product. And that is why the transition matters so much. When the transition is bad, life insurance feels random. When the life insurance feels random, the customer will always push back. And when the customer pushes back, the producer gets uncomfortable. And when the producer gets uncomfortable, they just stop asking. And when they stop asking, the agency keeps leaving money on the table. But when the transition is connected, everything changes. The producer has a reason to actually bring it up. The customer understands why it matters. And the conversation starts to feel much more natural. The team becomes more confident, and then life production becomes more consistent. This is also why the owner cannot be the only one. In a lot of agencies, the owner can absolutely sell life insurance. They know how to have the conversation. They understand the value. They've done it before. They've been doing it for years. They can see the opportunity very naturally. But the team does not have the same words. So life insurance only gets written when the owner brings it up. And if life only gets written when you bring it up, you do not really have a team process yet. You have a personal production habit. And that works, until you get busy. It works until you're pulled into more service issues and fires you need to put out. It works until you're dealing with hiring, claims, renewals, operations, carrier meetings, and everything else that comes with owning an agency. If you want consistent life insurance production, the team needs a process they can actually run. Not a complicated one, a simple one. They need to know where the life insurance opportunities are. They need to know how to transition. And they need to practice the words and what they're actually saying. And they need to be reminded constantly and consistently, because what does not get talked about gets forgotten. So if the goal is not to turn your team into aggressive life insurance salespeople, the goal is to help them recognize the life opportunities that already exist in their daily P&C conversations, and then give them the words to open those conversations in a way that feels natural. That's the whole game. Find the P&C moment, connect it to the exposure, open the life insurance conversation, and then solve one immediate need. That is how you make life insurance feel relevant in the P&C world. And that's how you lower resistance. And that is how your team starts asking more consistently. So if your agency is not writing life insurance consistently, don't immediately assume that your team is lazy, they're scared, or maybe they're bad at sales. They may just not have the right bridge. They may not know how to get from the P&C conversation into the life insurance conversation. They may not know what to say when the customer gives a first objection. They may not know how to bring it up without sounding salesy. So fix the transition first. Because when the transition feels natural, your team actually asks more. And when they ask more, more conversations happen. And when more conversations happen, life insurance production becomes a lot more consistent. If you're a P&C agency owner and you want help getting your team to start opening more life insurance conversations inside the calls they're already having, click the link in the description to learn more. I'll show you how we help P&C teams use added autos, home renewals, mortgage changes, everyday P&C transactions to naturally sell life insurance without sounding pushy. Because you may not need more leads, you may need your team to stop missing the openings and the opportunities that are already happening. Fix the transition first.